So those are the three main areas that people are willing to pay.
And you know, we're talking about the kind of the full market, and we're talking about planning for the future and looking forward. So obviously, you know, all of you are kind of planning for this kind of future scenario, and you must have in mind, you know, what that customer is. And I mean, are we designing for the customer of today, or are we looking at, you know, evolving trends and demographics, you know, family living arrangements? When we talk about the home, I mean, you know, the home of the future, to me, could be something that talks about the, first I want to know about the demographics, about the age cohort, about the cultural background, people's living arrangements, family arrangements are changing all the time. I mean, really, we're not talking about the 1950s, the 60s kind of, you know, nuclear family kind of scenario. And obviously in California, maybe in San Francisco more than most, we're seeing very interesting kind of living arrangements. So who are you designing for? What is the basis of your family of the future, your demographic? Can I just kind of like flesh some of that out? And any of you can kind of take this, whoever feels comfortable about that.
So I'm just going to take a quick run at it, and I'm going to pass it on. So the most active segment of the market, from at least device perspective and some of the services, are a sector that is about 30-ish% of the population in the US, and we characterize them as tech enthusiasts or smart home enthusiasts. Some people call them affluent nesters. They have disposable income. They're very interested in keeping their home up to date and spending money on them. Those are the main people who are paying right now for those devices and services. The second sector, which is interesting, is people who want to show off their homes. We call them impressors. They actually spend quite a bit of money on smart homes and smart home devices and services to do that. And there are a bunch of other sectors and segments that are smaller, but these are the main two segments that are driving this industry right
now. So I think the trends are, you know, elderly population is growing, has been growing. So I think that's a market that can't be ignored. So I think elder care, remote health monitoring, those are kinds of services that do solve a pain point, clearly. There's a huge market for them, and if you have an elder parent, like I do, or grandparent, because everybody's younger, yeah, welcome. You are probably paying a lot of money for hospice care or assisted living. And if you can do both, you can do two things for those families, which is increase the quality of life that they have, which means they can live in their own home for a longer period of time, and save them money. That's just a one-two punch. That's just a perfect combination. So I think that market's not going away. It's going to keep growing. It's going to be a very attractive market. You guys looking for ideas? I have a bunch of ideas in that space as well. I think that deserves a lot of attention. And that's on the positive side. On the negative side, I want to throw some water on energy management, because I think in this country, and I know maybe most of you are not from this country, maybe you are. By the way, I'm French. I'm hiding my accent. Where's Patrick? I don't think energy management is a big concern in this country, rightfully so, because energy is relatively cheap. Right? It's 4 times more expensive to buy a gallon of gas in Europe, in England, than it is here. And until that happens, nobody's going to give 2 hoots about saving 10% off the utility bill, because it's a $150 bill. I mean, it's important, but it's not the low-hanging fruit that I want to save money on as a consumer. I'm not going to walk into Best Buy and spend $400 on a device that saves me $3 a month or $5 a month or whatever the number is. And even if the numbers are there, it's just not a sexy, compelling thing to do. Now, if it comes free or almost free on top of something else that you're already getting, like security, automation, that's somebody else a good point for you. That's a whole different story, right? So that totally makes sense. But as a standalone concept, I don't think there's not much there here. In Europe, you see a lot more traction because the dynamics and the numbers make sense, right? It just doesn't here. So those are my two areas that I think are going to trend up and trend down.
Oh man, I mean, I think anytime we start segmenting the population on how it's going to adopt smart home, we kind of miss them. I mean, I think in a lot of cases, if this isn't fundamentally making the products around us better, and making our lives easier to put this in, then I think that we're kind of overshooting. We're asking too much. You know, I mean, one key one, and let me just take, outside the U.S., a lot of Lorraine's customers are international, and one of the key markets in there are room air conditioners, because that's, central air is really the minority in the world. And you think about the billions of people that are out there that are coming home to a turned off air conditioner and sitting in their home when they get home and waiting for it to get cool for the first 20, 30, 45 minutes, sweating, right? That's a broken product. It just is, right? That's a lot of little extra suffering that's going out there right now because that thing doesn't have connectivity. And so I think, that doesn't really segment, on that piece. If you really nail the use cases and you make a better product, it doesn't really segment. It's when you're kind of asking too much from that consumer that you have to get very specific on who you're going after.
We touched upon two things there. One was coming up with something like the remote health, and Reza, you mentioned this, and this goes to a person I was talking prior to the event here. And it seems to me that, two things that me as a consumer, and having kids on the one hand and kind of aging parents above us, something that would kind of enable me to help monitor your parents, your aging parents' health, and at the same time kind of managing kind of like what your kids are up to as well. I mean, to me as a parent, that to me would seem like an obvious kind of like development avenue. I mean, those are things, with all due respect to your refrigerators telling you how many bananas, or, kind of whether your milk is going off. As I said, that's what I thought cereal was for, discovering that your milk is going off. But, it's kind of like, can we expand upon these, that we're talking about products which kind of monitor how people act in their home, or how occupants of the home are using kind of like these interfaces, whether your kids are on the internet before they've done their homework and things like that. Is that an area that you guys are looking into? Because as a consumer, as a non-technical person, I'm going, that would really help me. Who wants to take that? I think Shane's going for it. Go, man. Go, Shane.
The kind of cool part about these connected products is we're still finding the applications on that. I kind of, the analogy is almost like, networking for computers. We started off with justifying putting networking in our computers because we had like shared printing, right? We could all use the same printer. And obviously we discovered a couple more uses for networking other than shared printing. The ones that really kind of resonate with me are, taking something as simple as like your garage door and knowing how long that's been opened. That was just a flyer feature we put in there. We said, okay, we'll tell you if your garage door's been open for 4 hours. And then going back with the consumers and actually seeing what they use that for, it starts to be like a proxy for loved ones, right? I don't want to like LoJack my kids or my wife, but I am willing to open my phone up and say, well, the garage door's still closed, so they're probably not home now. Or my favorite is, you didn't make curfew last night. The garage door has only been closed for 5 hours, and that means you weren't home at 10. So I think those are the kind of things that are starting to, where people are finding these other uses for connectivity after they've had the first one that maybe bought it for. They wouldn't spend a lot of money, and it had to be really simple to install. But now all of a sudden it starts to kind of leak into the way that we, our, the little social fabric between us, to understand how we run our lives, and starts to become part of that, even if it was kind of accidental or incidental in that case.
That's a pretty great example. Have you anything to add into that in terms of remote health monitoring, or just, how our kids are in the home?
I guess it's one thing to try to predict the future, but as Shane said, most of them fail. And it's one thing to rely on today's data. And what I mentioned, in today's data, remote health and your parents, checking on parents and using connected devices and wearables to do that type of stuff, for whatever reason, people are not paying for it. They're more paying for things that are related to security and safety of the house. And the second level that we see, selling these devices, and we have apps on those and kind of have some idea what apps are being used, are the people who want to show off their light, that they can turn it off and on, or the door that when they pass through, something happens, and when they leave the house, they just push a button and the vacuum cleaner start cleaning the house and lights go off and things like that. I'm certainly with you that it's a great use case. It's a very important use case, but so far there is not a lot of money from consumer going into it.
Do you want to add?
What was the question again?
Well, what I want to do is kind of take us on that, like, with security and a lot of these kind of services, because that's essentially what they are. You know, this suggests that we basically have a third party monitoring our information offsite, and this kind of comes to a concern that a lot of consumers have, be it real or imagined or whatever. You know, the people want to know how the data that is being collected and how it's being used, and is it being shared, and how secure is it, and you know, it brings up the issue of vendor trust and security and how we're addressing that. And you know, I think it's a fear that it might be a misplaced fear, but I think it's probably something that's in minds of people. And how do we address that? How do we reassure people that all of these machines aren't going to either gang up on you, or all this data that's out there isn't going to be used in this kind of world of learning about Edward Snowden and what NSA is supposed to be learning about us? You know, I mean, it might be a level of paranoia, but real or not, I think it needs to be addressed. How do you want to?
Sure. So I think it's definitely real because you hear about it. Whether or not it's substantiated, it's got to be addressed because some people are concerned about it. So I think with any kind of emerging market or technology, you're going to get a certain section of the population that's going to be very conservative and very maybe paranoid, if you want to call it that, or maybe rightfully so. And you know, I think some of that is overblown right now, I believe. That's just my personal opinion. I do think the companies that are getting into IoT and smart homes and providing cloud services that get into the home and allow you remote monitoring, control, all the things we've been talking about, they do need to worry about security because it's another access point into the home. So they need to lock down encryption, authentication, security passwords, which are not just, you know, 3 letters. So you have characteristics that kind of protect the user. But I'll tell you this, I remember online banking coming to fruition, what, 10 years ago, 12 years ago? And I personally was like, there's no way in hell I'm gonna do anything with my bank. I'm not gonna, you know, go and withdraw cash or do whatever. And I'm depositing checks today. I'm taking a picture of my check, depositing it, I'm not even going to the bank or going to the ATM. So they locked it down, they made it secure. There's a lot of psychology in there that really is kind of, for the most part, where you're never going to get rid of the fringes that are always going to be worried. They're worried about the conspiracy theories and all that stuff. But from the mass market point of view, that's really gone away. That's not there anymore. And I think, you know, that's going to be the same. We're not there yet with IoT and smart homes. But I think the companies involved need to be really very diligent about not making any bad examples out of data leaking out. And if they do a good job of that, I think we'll be fine.
So Shane, do you have anything to tie in that?
Yeah, I'm worried. I think you know, everyone confuses kind of the IoT wave on devices with just another sort of you know, wave in networking, like we went from computers to smartphone. But we don't really realize that there's going to be, you know, 50 billion devices, I think, by 2020. And if we continue to kind of treat it as an IT problem, where we're going to kind of put these computers in our things and put them out there, and then kind of hope that we'll get them patched or they're going to fix or anything else like this, there aren't enough IT people on the planet to solve it this way. IoT is really a very, very different beast than IT, and the ways that you secure it and the ways that you manage it. And quite frankly, making sure that the simple products that we allow in our home remain simple products. Yes, they can have connectivity, but I think there's a lot of shortcuts being taken in IoT right now where it's just faster to get kind of a Linux gum stick and put some networking around it and put it out there. And leaving these gaping holes, you know, in our house. In many cases, you know, 4 or 5, 6, 7 of them if I start adding these products. So I think security is a really big deal, and I think that some of the leading companies there are starting to think about what this looks like when it gets big and how it's managed. But I think the biggest mistakes that I see out there right now is people treating it like an IT problem and hoping that they can get enough layers of complexity on their devices they'll be able to fight back on the security side. Not for IoT.
So, and from more,
Just after that,
Sure.
one thing to that, I just was thinking when we were talking. So I'll give you a real life example, right? So one of my controls customers is ADT, sort of de facto brand in home security, right? They basically put us through the ringer, rightfully so, to make sure that everything and anything that had to do with customer data was locked down as it could be, right? We had some stuff in there, but it wasn't nearly as good as we thought, because here's a security company telling us how to be secure. It was awesome. My point about this is that it's really up to the manufacturers, and I don't know how many of you here are, actually show of hands, who's actually developing products or has a startup in smart home and IoT. So, a couple, 10-ish, right? So the responsibility is on you guys, right? To make sure, it's not on homeowner, it's on you guys, I think that's kind of what you're saying, to make sure that that's locked down and it's tight. And please do that, because one bad, one picture of somebody's kid, in a bedroom ending up on Twitter and game over, right? That's just going to kill the market. And we're really, really careful at iControl to make sure that we're just religious about making sure the encryption, authentication, everything is secure. And I would say it's probably at least an order of magnitude more secure and more locked down than online banking, which is why we do it.
because, well, you're right in the front row here,
Sure.
with consumer products.
Absolutely. On security side, I'm with the other panelists. I think security is table stakes. You can't just do any type of service or any type of device these days without proper security, and it's a solved problem. But notwithstanding heartbleed and things like that, that's once in a while go wrong. But generally speaking, our computers are we've accepted that they're secure with today's technology. But the other real nuance is privacy. That even a very secure system can compromise your privacy. And on that, I'm not that concerned. There are a lot of people that say, wow, everyone is going to know everything about us, and how are we going to live from that point onward, and Google is going to know about us, our thermostat company is going to know about us, our garage door company is going to know about us. But we are, as consumers, willing to do that. How many of us have Gmail? Most of us. A lot of us have Gmail, and we're willingly share our data with Google, and we are actually making Google machine to run. Google is not in search business or mail business or email business. They're in advertising business, and the way they do that is by collecting data from us. So we're all worried about privacy, but we have a price. If our price is paid, we're willing the data to go. I'm not suggesting that this is not going to be an ongoing issue. It will be an ongoing issue. There will be startups that are going to, there are actually technologies that are being developed that allows us as users to control how much data goes to the cloud, how much stays in my private home cloud, which we call it fog. It's around my home network. And I can turn them on and off, and I only allow things to go to the service provider in the cloud if there's enough value for me. But that's the key. If there's enough value for me, I'll let it go.
And that's a really excellent, and I want to get to that point further on into our discussion, but I want to talk about protocols and interoperability, of devices and platforms to see if this is necessary, and well, I'll probably have you talk about that. Do we need that for the adoption of the smart home? And then somebody said, what happens when the internet goes down? I mean, these type of things. So,
We certainly, in broad adoption, we need interoperability, and that's just a component, because all the devices in the world are not going to be built by one company, and all the services in the world are not going to be offered by one company. So we need to be interoperable. But interoperability and standards happen generally by standard bodies like IEEE or IoT or IETF, and those are made up big companies, mostly. And big companies, they don't invest money and send engineers and standard experts to those bodies to create standard protocols and then change their products unless there is market drive for it. The scale has reached to a certain level that it makes sense economically to do that. For IoT, and I argue for smart homes, we're not there yet. We will get there. And those costs are going to be justified. But for broad adoption, we have to have that. Imagine, think about when electricity was introduced to houses. Imagine that in a house, in one room you had one type of wall outlet, and in another room you had another type of wall outlet. And then your, mixer or your toaster had a different plug that didn't work with any of those. So you couldn't operate electricity. The same applies to smart home and to IoT, and we will have standards, but it has to make sense. For a while, maybe a few years, we're going to be silos of companies, and we're going to have different standards, but we will come together eventually. Another good example is text messaging, SMS. I remember days that you couldn't send SMS from, actually it was called Singular, to AirTouch, which was one of the components of Verizon. It didn't make economic sense back then to do that. Then as soon as usage went up to above the level, these companies got together and they went back to Bell Labs and Nortel and Motorola, and they said, make your switches talk to each other. We won't buy it from you if you don't. And they did it, but they charged for it. So there's the investment and cost involved for any standardization. It will happen, but not anytime soon.
And Reza and Shane, you must have experienced this. So what are your comments on this?
So to my prior company before iControl, we had a religion about the standard we were trying to push. So I made a promise to myself never get into the standards protocol religion business. So at iControl, we support pretty much every standard there is. We're open and agnostic about which devices, Wi-Fi, Zigbee, Z-Wave, whatever. So I don't believe the concepts we're talking about are hindered by standards pace. I think standards have been around for a while. Zigbee, Z-Wave have been around for a while. Wi-Fi's been around for a while. Cat5 and RJ45 connectors have been around for a while. I think it's more of a business challenge, which is solving a problem, an actual problem, which is my earlier comment. Not whether it talks. Look, if you're a homeowner, you don't give a shit about Z-Wave or Zigbee or Wi-Fi. You just want the thing to work, right? You don't care what protocol the thing is on. And pardon my French. It's the only French I know. You just want it to work. And I think if you go back to what we were talking about, which is if you solve a problem that people really want, you create a full product, the other stuff will work itself out. Somebody out there, one of you smart guys or 5 of you guys will figure out how to make that product work with whatever standards. And that's what we did 12 years ago, 11 years ago. It was a pain in the butt to do it, to make all those radios work together. Well, we did it. Why? Because the customers, the consumers wanted it and they asked for it. So we did it. So I think it's more of a business model, go-to-market, and channel and pain point challenge right now than it is a technological challenge, and interoperability challenge.
And Shane?
Well, and one of the clear things is that if you look at like Homeland, the forces of divergence right now are stronger than the forces of convergence. So, we look at other things like obviously BLE getting traction recently, Thread off Google and other pieces there. So I think probably the most informative thing to look like is to kind of look at history a little bit and think about, if you think about what the internet protocol was used for initially, it wasn't carrying its own traffic. It was a wrapper for what DevNet was doing. It was a wrapper for what IAM was doing. It was just trying to get these things to talk together. So I think the big thing for me is that the first interoperability layers that start to gain traction are going to be in the cloud. So no matter how these products connect, and this is something we work on really passionately at Rand, figuring out how to make sure that no matter how it connected, is that device model or is that agent in the cloud compatible with the other device modules and agents that are out there, so we can start to put together systems of these products. And I think that's really where the first layers of interoperability are going to be, so you can actually build systems out of products where the manufacturers didn't necessarily work together. to get there. So I think that's kind of where we see this going.
Thanks. I want to come back to a comment you made here. We were talking about data security, so sorry for kind of backtracking here a little bit. When you mentioned, Mo, about the cloud versus the fog. And, you know, we think of the home, you know, there's an expression that, you know, that the home is like a person's castle. It's their secure environment. It's where they go to feel safe. And I'm hearing anecdotal people, and these are people here in San Francisco. And looking for what we would call a digitally neutral kind of territory. And what I'm inquiring here is how do we make the home? Are we looking for a place that when we step outside the threshold and we go out, we pretty much accept that we're fully connected? I mean, you know, anybody who has a smartphone, I mean, it doesn't matter. You're tracked everywhere. You've done it. But that's, to your point, you know, that's kind of like, we've made that deal with the devil. You know, it's a value proposition. We say, yeah, it's worth doing. When we go across the threshold and we go in our front door, you know, is there a way of becoming kind of like the default is, no, I will choose how my data is shared. And this is going to the fog. And I'm just saying this as, I think we need to be respectful of this. And I'm wondering if in a more digitally connected world, will we seek respite, as it were, in this kind of like safe and secure envelope? And I'm only kind of passing on kind of anecdotal stories I've had here in San Francisco from people who are highly digitally connected, but also choosing to be kind of like, when I go home, I'm kind of banishing my cell phones, no cell phones in the bedroom, no devices like this in certain parts of the house. And there's this kind of trend. And I just want to put that out to any and all of you who want to take that topic. So it doesn't seem to be shame wanting to take it.
I'm not quite sure I got the question there, so.
I read the question I'm saying is, can we create a kind of a digitally neutral territory where we can kind of isolate, or we can choose how our information is dispersed to a larger group beyond our home?
I see. So if there's a proxy of some sort that we use to say, so-and-so can get my data, but these guys can't.
Correct. And in other words, the default is I get to choose what's leaving my home. In other words, my home is fully connected internally. That's great, but I get to choose what gets out and into my home.
Yeah, I mean, certainly that's technically possible. I don't see that happening anytime soon because that's yet another layer of interoperability, if you will, where everybody has to agree that they're all going to go through this proxy. So I don't think anybody's working on that. I don't know if you guys have thought about that or not. But for me, my dashboard is, you know, personally, I just make that decision. You know, if I want to be found, I'd either turn my GPS off on my phone or I turn the phone off, put it in airplane mode, and then nobody's going to know where I am. That doesn't happen that often, or hardly ever, because part of me paying the price, the bill for my cell phone and the price of signing up for it was the risk or the potential risk of that exposure, if you will, of data. And I think Mo was totally right. You know, we all want to have privacy, but there's a price for it, and we pay for it. So you don't have to have a cell phone. You don't have to be listed on the address book. You can call Google and tell them to take you off their search list, right? You can do all that stuff. It's totally up to you. But I don't think most of us do.
I think that might be a very niche area, even if it ever develops. Any company who's in business for mass market looks at the market as a bell curve. And anything that goes beyond one standard deviation from B, that's basically too far out from the average. And when you look at our behavior right now, the way we treat our privacy and the way we're willing to allow companies to know about the fact that we use credit card. It just has nothing to do with cloud or recent, or we've been using credit card for a long time. For the convenience, we allow certain large businesses to know a lot about us. By looking at your purchase, I come from Amazon before Samsung, I worked for Amazon. there is a lot that you can infer from purchase history of an individual. A lot. It's unbelievable that the correlations that you can figure out from just that one dimension of data. But we're willingly and happily allow that to happen. So again, I go back to my previous comment. I'm not too concerned about privacy issues. We will have, basically this is a technological shift. We're in transition. We're getting used to this new thing. And we will have ups and downs. We will have some issues, some mishaps are going to happen, and people are going to rebel, but eventually we're all going to get used to it. Some technologies will solve parts of it, and parts of it will be solved by us, by accepting the fact that we live in a different world.
So I think, the privacy point, can really come down to, is this an area to start applying great product design? One really near and dear one is, I have a bunch of cameras in my house, right, that are really useful. I can see my dog. Something happens in my house, I can look at those cameras. But do I want those cameras on when I'm home, right? So really thinking around, how do we make these products so that, using things like locale, the tool, the mobile device to actually enhance privacy, when that device happens to be in home, okay, I want all my cameras to be dark at that point. I don't want it to be possible to record. I don't want it to be possible for anybody else to see what's going on, things like that as well. So I think that privacy thing really comes down to, can we nail it with really good platforms that enable great designers to think about all the design forces that may be affecting someone? And I think some of these second order things that you're talking about before may not be primary of the first wave of products that come through, but will probably differentiate the ones that end up leading. Really thinking about some of those second order effects.
So I'm going to change again the scale here, because we've been talking about the home, and we're talking about privacy and securing the home. And speaking kind of as an urban designer and involved in the creation of eco-districts, I don't know how many of you out there are familiar with the term of eco-districts. In San Francisco, we're bringing them in. It's basically like for shared utilities, shared power, and it's basically creating a district where the sum of the parts, is greater. The whole is and what I want to know is there anybody out there developing so you can make the smart homes all talk to each other and maybe talk back to the utility company, or allow agencies to kind of smooth out energy flows to districts on a district-wide level, kind of going beyond the home into a neighborhood or district level? I mean, this might be a yes or no answer, but I was wondering if you're aware of anything. I'm not, but I'd love to hear from you guys. Samsung did anything?
Sure. Let me actually give an example that it's fact right now, and it's publicly available data. Where I was going in the beginning, that the connectivity and the sensors that are connected inside houses, combined with a little bit of machine learning and intelligence, create a lot of new opportunities. And some of those new opportunities are new businesses. I'll give you an example about Nest. In Austin, you can buy Nest $80 cheaper than anywhere else. And the utility companies happily paying for it, that extra $80. Why are they doing that? Because in Austin, sometimes during the summer, the days get really hot very quickly. The way they have to compensate and go and get and buy electricity, they have to go and to some power plants that are run by natural gas. They're very expensive, multiple times more expensive than normal operational costs of their own power plants. But they don't have a choice. They want to make sure that enough electricity exists for the user, for the consumer. They found a clever solution. They said, let's assume X percentage of our users are using Nest, and we encourage them to do so. And they made a deal with Nest that if a day like that happens, instead of us going to these very expensive power plants and ask them to start their power plant and get it up and running, we tell Nest to just higher the temperature in the houses that they can detect that there's no one at home, or even houses that there are people at home, to just by half a degree or a degree. that alone will compensate for the whole need for the extra electricity. So definitely, these are new types of businesses that are created in an ecosystem that we have never had before. And these are new types of revenue streams that we can only have because we have access to the grid.
That's actually terrific news. I don't know if any other panelists want, whether you're familiar with anything or whether to.
Well, I didn't know one of the other big ones people are looking at are electric cars. Just because and this is just an operational issue. If everybody on the block buys an electric car and charges it all at once, we're not ready for that. So we're going to have to coordinate, and we're going to have to kind of take turns, unless there was a massive change in the infrastructure around how we deliver electricity. So that's another key one we're working with some of the electric chargers as part of that.
Well, I'm going to finish up here, kind of the formal question, so to speak, asking you, like, developing products, and we know that we can't kind of predict the future, and, what should we be aware of, and what are the positives and negatives, but what are the most promising opportunities for people, for entrepreneurs, take on with regards to like smart homes, and, what are you most excited about? What is the product that you guys out there can't wait to see, that you might know about or you'd like to develop? It's going to be a must-have.
Am I going first? All right. So I alluded to the elder care, health monitoring stuff, taking sort of the quantified self-movement, Fitbit and MyBasis and all those kinds of devices, but taking it a step further and applying it to real health monitoring, outpatient monitoring, but also elder care. So that's one area, but I want to, since I already talked about what I think is exciting, but I want to just kind of say what we shouldn't do as well, which is the opposite. And I'm seeing a lot of this happen, which is it's so easy now to say, you know what, I'm going to connect this piece of hardware